Hey everybody, this is Silver Spook and this is the Silver Spook Neofeud 2 update video, and also boldly composing, building ancient slash future indigenous civilizations and more, and lots of fun stuff. So today I'm gonna be paying more close attention to the chat. So if you do have questions, comments, this is like a Silver Spook live AMA sort of event. I've been doing like a few of these in between the other less interactive videos. So, but yeah, anyways, Neofeud 2, if you don't know what it is, you probably know. If you don't know, it is a science fiction cyberpunk retro point and click adventure game. Then it is a sequel to Neofeud 1, which you can get on Steam or itch.io. Described as secretly the greatest and also funniest cyberpunk game on Steam, among other things. If you like Neofeud, don't forget to leave a review. Help us get the game discovered here at the Silver Spook Cooperative. As I was informing some other people this week, we don't have any money for marketing. I do know these live streams work because somebody literally came into one of the live streams and was asking questions about Neofeud, and I was talking about the game, and I was doing live Neofeud 2 game dev. If you want to learn more about that, I do that on the Twitch sometimes in the evening times, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday. And somebody was like, "Oh, I'm really gonna go buy this." They like buy it while they're watching the stream. So, and if you do want to support us here at the anti-capitalist, that's illegal in America now, apparently. Anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, indigenous-run cooperative, Silver Spook Games. You want to support our work here in building ancient, but also future indigenous civilizations. I'm specifically Native Hawaiian here in Hawaii. You can help us out by grabbing the game and leaving even a very short review on Steam, and does help us to get the game discovered when people are looking for games. It really does help. So don't forget to do that if you have been, if you like the game and you just like, oh, I don't have time to write a review right now. Consider just even a short thing like, oh, I like this game a lot. I like point and click adventure games, or just anything. Just like, it's really about like comments on the YouTube channel, and liking and subscribing help channels get visible. It's similar for video games. Anyways, okay, so now I'm going to look at the chat. But I know it's probably early in the morning, and people are like, seriously, I thought you were just going to go off for like 2 hours on everything. But I'm probably not going to do that, because partially is update from the game development parts of what I do. I am pretty deep right now into the composition phase. Sorry, just trying to check that chat. I'm in the composition phase, which means that the music composition specifically, not composing the writing or anything else. The voice acting is done. I'm gonna call it done. There's a few little like one line things to fix here and there. But for the most part, the voice acting is, for all intents and purposes, it's done. I'm not going to spend much more time on it. I simply do not have time to do that, because I got to get this game out sooner than later. What's up, Street Cat? Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like the stream as well. It really does help the games get streams discovered in the algorithm. But yeah, anyway, so I'm deep in the composition phase of game development. Voice acting, obviously, if you don't know this, I've been working on this game for 8 years, which is about as long as Hollow Knight Silk Song's developers. My goal is to get it out by the end of this year. So to get it out by the end of this year, I need to be in the composition, music phase, the writing, programming. I do basically everything as well. I'm like a solo indie dev. I think Hollow Knight Silk Song had 3 people, so I'm even smaller than that. I'm one person I did that for Neofeud 1, with the exception of about half of the voice acting. I can't pull off 30 to 85 characters. The Neofeud 2 has 85 characters. I am not Tara Strong. I am not one of those master voice actors that can pull out 200 voices that sound distinct from one larynx. I can't, and one set of lungs. I can't do that. So, but apart from that, everything is like, for example, the writing. I wrote the storyline. I built the world. There is a Silver Spook cinematic universe. The Silver Spook game. The Silver Spook gamic universe. I have to build all of that. So like who the sentient machines, the robots, the neo-feudal royalty, all that kind of stuff. Who the characters are, the history of the world in Neofeud and Neofeud 2, the science fictional, speculative fiction. So, this picture is a little bit where Neofeud 2 branches out from Neofeud 1, but it's pretty cyberpunk-ish sort of science fictional world. And Neofeud is a little more meta and satirical and surreal than maybe some cyberpunk. Neofeud is it's a pretty specific sort of. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it. It's kind of gonzo. Maybe it's one way to describe it. It's like a Hunter S. Thompson term. But anyways, so I have to create the world, write the story, write the plot, design the puzzles, the gameplay, design all the gameplay, code the game, program the game in Adventure Game Studio, paint all the art, the backgrounds, like what you're seeing right now. I painted that. Paint the characters, their portraits. Neofeud and Neofeud 2 are pretty high res. They're like 1360 by 768, so it's higher res than 90s point and click, which is it's a pretty unusual thing to do. But it's that's part of why Neofeud stands out to the extent that it does. So part of why. So, but I had to paint the art. I got to do the animations, and then I have to the characters walking and doing various actions, right? Shooting their guns when they do at various times, and create all the portraits for all the characters when they're various emotions, like angry, sad, happy, smirking, etc. And high resolution, and then so all of that, and then I have to get voice acting for the entire game. And so Neofeud 1 again has about 76,000 words, and Neofeud 2 is about 140,000 words. So Neofeud 2 is about double. So that was about a year. It took me a year to get the voice acting, which is longer than I wanted to, but it is what it is. So yeah, it's pretty wild. The voice acting for Neofeud 2 took literally a year to compile the entire script, organize the entire script, send out like hundreds of messages, and I had to direct literally like 40 people and myself. I'm the director. I'm the main voice actor. I am the director. I am the editor. I'm everything. It's like I have to do everything. So it's a little bit wild. I'm gonna not do that. I'm probably not gonna do this again. Like Neofeud 2 might be the last time I solo everything. It might be the last time I do that because it's kind of too much. It already was too much with Neofeud 1, but circumstances were what they were. I was a broke corporate cog in the machine like Carl Carbon, just grinding away at some AAA game studio, making Flappy Bird clones and, trying not to, work for companies that do asset flips for a living and, money grubbing cell phone games. And then I started Silver Spook Games because I didn't want to do that. But nobody will give you funding, which means you're not going to have a large number of team members to make indie games. Little side note, and I'll check the chat shortly. The producer of Silent Hill, the recent Silent Hill, just said, interestingly, there is no future for big corporate AAA games if the big studios are not willing to take risks. But they're not willing to take risks because it could damage the brand to try something new, which is what indie game devs that are like Silksong, etc., that have all blown all of the bigger, quadruple-capitalist game studios out of the water, like EA, like the Borderlands, like the Microsoft, Xbox. Microsoft itself is exploding, but so is its games division. all these bigger corporations, they're not willing to take risks because it could damage the brand, but making the same old not risky stuff is also not making any money, but nobody wants to acknowledge that. So it's paradoxically they want to use AI to replace all the creatives and artists, but that is, they don't understand how creativity and what artistry actually is, and in trying to replace their creatives and workers with AI, which is not actually doing creative work, it's stealing other artists' creative work and then vomiting it back up badly. Nobody wants to buy that. Nobody wants to buy desoulified. Nobody wants to buy like Shang Tsungified. Because Shang Tsung takes your soul, right? And AI is like a cyber Shang Tsung. It's a waste of software and hardware, right? And chips that are running short due to losing Western trade wars. Bye bye rare earth. And so nobody wants to buy that stuff. Nobody wants to buy a exercised game or movie. Nobody wants to look at exercised art, and I mean that is when the soul is taken out of it, and then it's resold by a corporation, right? Using AI to steal artists' work and then resell it. Nobody wants to actually buy it. It costs more money than it makes. Some people will look at it and be, some boomers will look at a few shrimp Jesuses for a while, but it's not actually worth it. And then you have robots looking at each other's shrimp Jesuses, right? You have AI generated social media accounts that are auto clicking on other AI generated art and to make it look like somebody is using your platform. But that, in the end of the day, like when the rubber hits the road, you need to actually have people that are using and consuming the products. Where the rubber hits the road is you start running out of basic resources like electricity, like semiconductors, like neodymium, and then you can't get any more because you just got a giant Ponzi scheme, mega Ponzi scheme called all of Western economy, Western everything, Western finance, and Western global capitalist, big tech, hot air that signifies nothing. It's just a bunch of pump and dump scams and pyramid schemes. And so, but the pyramid scheme explodes when you run out of electricity, right? And when someone else calls your bluff, and you're like, well, you got to actually make games. You got to make products. You can't just make rip off artistry. You can't just make, you can't just like churn out something kind of like the last product and your only job skill is self-aggrandizement, right? Which is what MBAs from Harvard and the biz bros and the crypto bros and all the Elon stands want to do is just kind of not actually be creative, just kind of talk about things like they're creative and gaslight other people and rip off their workers at game companies or other companies and try to replace their workers. And it's one thing for AI for software to do jobs. Like hardware and software has always like taken over various human abilities and human tasks, but it's like under a capitalist system where the oligarchy of a handful of rich people control everything, then they're going to choose the way in which and what exactly these technologies, whether that's AI or whatever it is, or robots, are going to do. So anyway, I'm already off the topic of Neofeud 2 updates, but long story short, so help us out at Silver Studio Cooperative to keep making these games by grabbing Neofeud 1 and sharing and the stream and sharing and liking and subscribing and getting and reviewing Neofeud 1 if you haven't yet. Okay, what's up, Gio? Yeah, there was some articles about people not buying games. People are still buying games, but they're buying more indie games, less big AAA games. People are buying less in general in certain countries, because certain people in certain countries have less money in general. So the younger generations can't afford a lot of games, but part of the reason why people aren't buying many games, Xbox was discounting all their biggest games by like 95%, because nobody's buying them because they're too expensive and they're broken and they're just bad. They're just badly made and they're boring and they're not original, right? It's kind of a paradox. It's like AI having the ability to like rapidly pump out. There's things that AI can do, but that means that like the actual human originality and human creativity is what is actually going to be valued. And what things that humans actually do offer, right? This is going to be complicated for anyone who doesn't understand what it is to actually innovate and create, right? Which is, actually the business school is not a thing you want to go to. You want to go to that doesn't teach you how to innovate. That teaches you how to be like a ruthless, uncreative labor stealer, basically, right? That's not making something new, right? It's the business school, the business guy, the capitalist corporate manager. Like we just watched Aliens yesterday, like Burke, right? The job is not to create things, just in general. It's to take things that people have created that are interesting to people and then try to make money from those things, right? It's all about trying to extract profit from people's labor, but that's not actually, right? That's what most of the AAA games are all about, right? They don't value creativity. Right? That's why I burn out working at big studios. Like literally, like a game company I worked at was just like taken over by EA. Literally EA. So EA is burning, and then good riddance. And EA like cut half of the people at the workplace and replaced them all with like less veteran, younger, lower paid workers. Like I've seen it happen. That's part of why I don't work at game companies. That's why I made Neofeud in part, because I watched capitalism destroy the lives of countless talented game workers, and not just all across the board, all over the game industry, and then replace it with not necessarily bad people, but just like underpaid younger workers with less protections, and then make a ton of money, taking the difference between what they're paying in the new salaries versus the old as profits, and the people at the top getting richer. You know what I mean? And like that is coming back to bite the game industry, like all industries, right? The U.S. Western-led capitalist system is exploding, and it has to. That's how you build new indigenous, non-capitalist, socialist civilizations or whatever kind of systems. Not based upon the profit and the benefit of a tiny minority of people, mostly from the global north and from the global west, and particularly of a particular hue and a particular gender. You have to, the old has to die, right? Or I should say, the new has to die, because the colonial capitalist era for the last 500 years replaced indigenous civilizations to a large extent worldwide that were trading more or less in more peace and more win-win cooperation than violence, war, and win-lose colonization, right? Which is what, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue and the Dutch created stock markets to, escalate the ill-gotten gains centralization in their stock markets, that was the new system. That's part of my point of like on that topic that I kind of slid in there, that there are ancient non-capitalist civilizations that were indigenous to various continents on the earth, and the future, and then the new system was the colonial system that Europeans brought to the world. And now we're going back to the future. We're going back to the future, right? Or we're going back to like pre-1492. But it's going to feel futuristic because the most advanced socialist countries have flying cars, and they are regreening the entire planet. Like they regreen an area on a regular basis the size of Belgium. They're like solving climate change. Like they have like the fastest trains in the world, the most advanced quantum computing in the world. They have like functional, useful AI that's actually helping the world cure. They're helping to cure diseases with it. They're helping to solve climate change. They're helping to deal with various illnesses and increase the food production, right? But that's I would argue that's actually and there's a worldwide push to re-indigenize. Like in Africa, they're removing all the colonial wigs and the European suit. They're not they're putting on their own kente cloth in various countries, like not just as a performative thing, like as their whole countries. This is what a normal daily work or play where it's our culture, our patterns, our African dances, clothes, history, all of that. They're completely education. There's a whole African media station out of Ethiopia that's going to replace CNN, France 24, all of that inside their whole continent, right? That's part of re-indigenization, right? Or restoring what was smothered 500 years ago, right? So that's how I'm trying to relate that to current events. Because some people like want me to talk about current events or what's happening now and not just what the game dev stuff. But like Neofeud, that's how Neofeud 2 also relates to, because what the image on screen is actually an indigenous. This is a science fictional future civilization. It's called the Veneran or Venuoran, the Venuoran civilization. This is what I call it. I don't call it a republic or a nation or this or that or the other thing, because it's just I kind of settled on that because it's too confusing the other way. But it's like, this is it's in Star Trek, Star Wars sort of setting where there's like a galaxy wide, space opera, science fictional expanse of worlds with there are various alien species across this expanse, and the most advanced ones run the galactic Silk Road, right, where there's a win-win trade and cooperation across the galaxy. And then the Utopians in Neofeud 2, there's this entity called the Utopians, right, and they bring star-spangled. They build military bases everywhere. They bring star-spangled crystalmancy. Crystalmancy missionaries, and the Bisberg Zuckerbucks and the Gates Waltons and the Clinton Bushes, all the richest imperialist families, the capitalists of Earth, all the neo-feudal royalty king / CEO / CIA directors, all the French banking elite in Paris that are all collapsing right now. They all fly to space, and then they try to repeat the crimes they did on Earth across the entire galaxy. And so Neofeud 2 is a galaxy-wide, so it has like a lot of Star Warsian, alien, Weyland-Yutani, like Weyland-Yutani Corporation is like kind of a similar kind of feel to the Utopians, but it's not just about a corporation being horrible and retelling Joseph Conrad's story. It's all of the collective West as a whole, all the way back through its feudal history, all the way back to its colonial history, its religion, all of it, and like how it because I'm a native Hawaiian. I'm not a I was a forcefully Americanized person. I am an indigenous Hawaiian person that has to kind of deal with that 500 years, right, of issues. But it goes beyond just the economic. It goes beyond the economic, and this is part of what's being acknowledged. As I said, Africa, in Mali, certainly the AES, but across the continent, they are saying we're going to tell our own history, wearing our tribal wear, but like updated versions of it. That doesn't make us uncivilized. The Maori, right, are like taking back their entire country. They're saying we're not going to take off our tattoos. We're going to do the haka when we feel like it. A colonizer in New Zealand complained about that, and the Maori said, well, you can complain about it. You can go back to wherever you came from because this is our home. You're visitors. China is saying, hey, this is not, the planet is not American until, that just doesn't know it yet. The planet is not a Western capitalist, liberal, democratic, a hot dog, barbecues and football culture haver. The Haiti is not just a French colony. It's not gonna be soon. Niger is not just a uranium mine for France that learns French history. It's gonna be Niger, by Nigerians, for Nigerians, of Niger, culturally, spiritually, economically, environmentally, socially. Everything has going to be shifting right now. Everything is shifting, not going to be shifting. Everything is shifting. I don't know if you know that. That's why everyone's going broke and things are falling. That's why nobody can afford to buy imperialist, capitalist games in the West, because the imperial capitalism that makes Call of Duty is dying. So anyway, so that's part of what Neofeud 2 is actually about. It's about that global process, the actual process of uh, global human species healing, maybe. Which and it has many dimensions. Another one is actually China actually has said that they're going to go through a process of Sinicization of religion and other aspects of the society. The sense that because they're like, there is a historical, like there are Muslims in China, but they have been there for a long period of time, and there's kinds of construction that they do. Just as one example, there's many religions and various there's 56 separate. In China is also an indigenous civilization with 56 separate ethnic minorities and various ethnic peoples that are all coexisting in one 3,500 plus year old civilization. The United States is a giant settler colony that has white Star Spangled Banners, a thin barbecue, and football culture. Like somebody, a Australian colonizer came up with that term. It has a thin barbecues, football, and greed. That's basically American culture, right? That is not a sustainable culture. That's a tumor in the human species. It's like unhealthy tissue. That it's like a tumor based upon infinite growth. It's not really supposed to be there. It's like a tumor under your arm, in your lymph node. I mean, it's living. Cancer is a living tissue. But, I mean, it's not conducive to reciprocal coexistence in the ecosystem that is your body. That's why it kills you. You know what I mean? So the United States and Australia and Canada and New Zealand are tumors in the human planetary, and also the human and the non-human family of various planet animal relatives. You know what I mean? They're premised on infinite growth, like a tumor. They don't really have a real reason to be there, right? Like an eye tissue, right? Your iris focuses light onto your retinal cells. That helps your brain to interpret. Your brain interprets the light so that you can see where you're going, so you can navigate the world as a human organism, as a Homo sapiens organism, right? A tumor in your eye, right? Cancer in your eye. Cancer is alive, right? Cancer has the right to exist. Cantor would say, cancer has the right to defend itself, right? When you give yourself chemotherapy, when you take a scalpel, when cancer fights back against your body, it causes lesions and cuts and all this terrible pain. Cancer has the right to exist, right? America has the right to exist, it will say. The United States has the right to exist. Canada, Australia, there's another country somewhere in the Middle East that will say it has the right to exist. It's living. There are people living there. There's a culture that thrives around it. People have barbecues, people have barbecues there. But like, is it like over in the long term of humans, the human species, the human spirit, the human soul, if there is one? I mean, people keep saying they want to buy games that have soul in it, but let's talk about that. What is that, right? Part of it is like that which pushes people and motivates people. What are people connecting to? People are connecting to like the actual issues and sometimes we'll call it politics, but it's actually like the real deep emotional and collective struggles that people have to go through in the society. And that's why people are connecting to people who are trying to stop what are people, you can't even say it on, you can't say it in cancer world, right? Otherwise your algorithm gets shut down, right? That's something that doesn't have the right to exist, right? Or it doesn't have the right to exist. It simply shouldn't, because it's killing everything. I mean, literally capitalism is killing. Environmental scientists, there's thousands of white papers I can tell you about how that economic structure and that system, just the economic structure, but it's part of a colonial system. It's part of white supremacy and all these other things, right? If you really analyze it, and that is literally killing the entire earth. Like there will not be ecosystems. I mean, through either nuclear war or overexploitation, climate, carbon emissions, and just total conversion of all life into bucks, into dollars and cents. It will end life. I mean, like just like cancer in your body. So that's why I say, like, it is about a planet wide. It's really the biosphere healing, right? Actually, by trying to get rid of the systems it has to locate and discover the system. And part of what cancer does is cancer disguises itself as your cells. It tries to fool your immune system so you can't tell what cells to get rid of, right? That's why liberals exist, right? So people can't tell, because if the conservative and mask off Sig Heilers ran everything, then it would be really obvious who to get rid of. But that's why you have to have more complex systems. They're like immune evasive spike proteins. Liberalism, right? Liberalism actually evolved to sustain colonial capitalism during the wake of a lot of revolutionary changes and a lot of upset and upswelling of the masses, several hundred years ago. But it kind of emerged. It had to kind of take the play. It had to take over, and it over after World War II. It definitely took over as the lead footing when the planet was more correctly identifying the root causes of the planet-wide, biosphere-wide, definitely human species-wide damage and destruction, right? And so it has to keep morphing, right? It's kind of like, why do you take a Novavax if you take one, right? Why do you take any kind of vaccine if you take one? You want to try to help your body to locate the enemy or the hostile, unwanted material. I mean, unless you like having COVID in your body, unless you like that, unless you like having, tuberculosis or tuberculosis, that's not a vaccine, but unless you like having measles, mumps, or rubella. I mean, the thing is, measles is a living thing too. Think of the measles in your body, right? That's what RFK is trying to do. He's saying, think about the plight of the measles life form. We need to allow it to spread through the human body because measles is living too. Measles, like the cows that the liberals cry about, right? Whenever somebody drinks some milk. Measles, like the chicken that everybody needs pictures of in their restaurant before they eat it or they don't eat it. Measles is living too. You have to let measles live in your body. Like measles, like solidarity with measles. But tumors are living things too, right? Tumors are living things too. They live in your body. It's living tissue. I'm not saying that that all of us has to be cut out like that. It's not actually the United States. Not any specific. Well, it's not any specific human that believes that they are American, a capitalist, a temporarily embarrassed millionaire. They're going to do great things in the U.S. military, right? The pro cop. It's just but people are programmed, right? People are conditioned. People are constructed, right? Everything is ultimately a gestalt, a construct in your mind. All identities, to a large extent. But they have real historical and real culture and history and who people are and ideology have real impacts in the world. And like some of them have really bad impacts in the world. You know what I mean? And I've already talked about a whole bunch of them. So anyway, I'm not talking about the Neofeud 2 update. I'm talking about other topics, but that is part of what I was trying to build with Neofeud 2 is what an actual healed sapient organism-led civilization would look like. That is not deeply toxic, self-destructive, and maybe not necessarily perfect, but more or less moving in the right direction and doing a better job than the United States capitalist, imperialist, racist empire is doing, and all of its predecessors, like the British Empire and the French Empire, and their feudal predecessors, etc. So I'm like, what? Like that's why I call it Neofeud, because it's a feudalism come back. And again, I really gotta thank Elon Musk for declaring himself the techno king of Tesla, with a master of coin, the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and I have to give a shout out to Peter Thiel for self-declaring himself as a neo-monarchist. And the No Kings rally, also I got to thank them for pointing out that, the kings never really went away. They just pretended to not be there, and they they pulled over the wool over the eyes of the antibodies, right? The idea of liberal democratic system, human rights, NGOs, NED, USAID, and Bono concerts, to fool people into believing that they had solved the problems when the guillotine started coming out back in the late 1700s. That's actually like a part of Neofeud is like that. Part of the thesis of Neofeud is that the neo-feudalism is simply the old system continuing forward. When the Western unjust ruling class feared for their heads, they had to cloak themselves in what America is today, and they came up with this mythology of the Enlightenment, all the mythology of the free democratic capitalist, the free democratic world based upon merit and the opportunity for everyone to live a happy, healthy, fulfilling life, and all of this nonsense, right? And actually, all of Western history, which is part of what Neofeud is about, it's actually us. It's an excoriation of the entire West, all of it. And that's why some people don't realize that, and that's okay. I don't really want everybody to realize that too early, because then they're gonna get mad. But some people realize, but it's like that, and so Neofeud too is like trying to get more direct with a little more direct maybe with some of these ideas, but like actually I'll talk about that after I read the chat a little bit. Okay, nobody's asking a question yet, so that's okay. Okay, anyways, I'll get back to the game stuff though, because that's part of what I said I was gonna do, so I should do at least some of that. So long story short, so I'm working on the music. I got the game is from start to finish. Programming, the writing obviously is done. The programming, the art, the gameplay, the puzzles, everything that's been done. The last year has been voice acting. Now I'm onto the music. So like yesterday and the day before that, I spent like about it's all like most of the day working on the music. I've been doing a lot of thinking, like what part of the reason why I chose this particular thumbnail or that image for this thumbnail is that I'm working on the music for this basically it's a hyper advanced billion-year-old socialist indigenous civilization that is like 26 dimensional. Like they're like basically godlike race, but they're also like a native people at the same time. So that's like it's a really complicated thing to do. Their life ways, their culture, their art. Like if you look closely at the patterns on this background, some of those are cultural. They're like on kappa cloth of native Hawaiians. Some of them resemble the canoe shapes of various indigenous Pacific cultures, like Maori, like Samoan, like Tahitian. There's also like East Asia and South Asia references. Like there's certain elements that resemble Chinese pottery and clayware, and there's Vietnamese and other. I have one of our comments. Our Vietnamese communist comrade Luna Oi is one of the voice actors as well in this game, and so some of it references that. And then there's also there's elements from like indigenous Turtle Island peoples like Anishinaabe and Lakota, etc. But it's because it's not. I don't. Neofeud 2's indigenous civilization, they're the species. It's a whole alien species technically. So they're not humans of any kind. They're like 1 billion years old, like I said. So they draw a lot from, like this is part about consciously coding your fictional characters and universes. There's actually a video I recently watched about why when Caucasian people talk about space racism, or they put racism into fantasy and sci-fi, there's always a lot of problems with it, right? And there's somebody else, I forget who it was that made this video. It was a black person that made this YouTube video about that, how space and sci-fi and fantasy racism is often kind of cringe when it comes from people that don't experience racism. And so, but anyways, well, long story short, so with Neofeud 2 it's been a long time working on this people. I mean, I spent like probably 6 of the 8 years trying to design this race and this society and their history and who they are and who their how their economic system works, how their science works, how their transportation works, how they have artificial intelligence, right? But the way they relate to artificial intelligence is more the way that indigenous peoples relate to artificial intelligence, right? Or I shouldn't say that. I should say how indigenous peoples just generally look at and relate to the cosmos, which includes systems that are encoded in silicon electron that flow in electrons and are based in non-carbon based patterns of matter organization. You know what I mean? Because that's the way they actually have their own they have an indigenous the Venerans have their own indigenous way of looking at computers themselves. They have computers. What the Utopian West, the space West would call computers. But the way they look at it is that, like, those are just different ways of organizing matter, right? So like your body, right? Your arm, right? Is, carbon, nitrogen, phosphate, and the sucrose molecules are the bonds of chemical energy stored in your sugar and protein molecules and fat molecules are being broken down by your muscles, right, to generate your hand movements or to keep your body alive, your heart pumping the blood, right? So those are all, to the Venerans, those are like patterns of energy and matter that are described as life, or their word is aura, right? And it's kind of like spirit. It comes from the Hawaiian word ola, right? Which is ola I kawai is like water is life. It's one of our slogans that we use here when we're protecting water from capitalist imperialist U.S. military poisoning our water supply, like at Red Hill. So like but the aura is in everything. It's not just in organic things, and it's not just in white, rich, male organic things, which is the way that the West perceives things historically, for millennia actually. Women were second-class citizens in Greece, and every Spartan had 7 slaves. And Thomas Jefferson, the founder of the so-called American great democracy, had 260 black slaves and was a sexual assaulter of a 14-year-old black girl that he had in his possession. So that's not treating life with respect. In ancient Greece, in 1700s America, I mean, certainly in America's settler colony in the Levant today. I don't know if you noticed that. I heard they're about to break the ceasefire, by the way. That's not treating life with respect. You know what I mean? But to indigenous people, like the patterns of the pattern of matter and energy. So like when a computer processes, thousands of kilobytes or megabytes of code and encoded graphical user interface, GIF format, animated GIFs, JPEGs, MPEG layer 4 video, right? It's processing energy. The matter is processing energy, different kind of energy. It's flowing through silicon, using the properties of quantum mechanics but all what a computer is doing, it is also processing energy. It's matter that is going through a process of, it's going through a physical process, and it's in a particular pattern, right? And it's not necessarily like that the computers all have rights in their civilization, but they understand that like any object and any entity that has patterns, certainly like certain kinds of patterns, because they do have like artificial intelligence that's basically their ancestors and their relatives, and they can put their bodies, or they can put their minds, their consciousnesses into computers. This ancient indigenous civilization, right? They can do those things, but the it's kind of the goal is that, like, the life, they define all life, right? No matter the weft and the warp of its strands. They look at the DNA is just a different way of, it's the DNA is this the DNA is the weaving of the weaving of reality into a carbon-based phosphorus and nitrogen consuming sucrose processing computer, right? Is one way to think about it, right? And then the computer, or what West would call computers, is there's a word that I created a whole language for them, basically, that uses a lot of indigenous concepts and indigenous cosmology, which is baked into language, which is completely separate from certainly separate from all Romance languages, but really most Western languages. So Romance meaning French, Spanish, Italian, and obviously the United States and the British and English are deeply. The veterans would say they are the descendants of the unhealed Star-Spangled Roman trauma. The Utopians are, and the Star-Spangled Roman, the American, is the descendant of the phalanx utilizing Roman, right? And so so the way the indigenous people in Neofeud 2 kind of view, the way the indigenous advanced civilization that's healed views not just the space Westerner that is trying to fight imperialist wars and invasions and is carpet bombing planets with Agent Orange and antimatter bombs to try to wipe out entire species and suck the oil out of planets and killing everything on it, leaving dried out, toxified radioactive husks. That people that's in space doing this colonization is the descendant, right? It's an untreated spiritual cancer that goes all the way back to the Earth empires, like the United States of the late 20th century and 21st century. And then it goes all the way back to older traumas that were never dealt with, and older injustices, older civilizational tumors like Rome that was never dealt with. It never actually had a revolution. It never cleansed itself, right, of its lack of respect for life. It just transmuted into, the Romance languages are the literal. You can see it in the language, right? When you do when the Latin Mass was done in Britain or in France or in Spain, right? That's part of the power, was an unjust corruption of the Palestinian resistance. That was Jesus Christ, because he was a Palestinian, into a weapon, right? That was right, and then that was every time they did a Mass in Latin, that's part of the trauma perpetuating itself forward as Roman Catholicism and Protestantism, under those banners, the bloodletting of entire continents occurred, right? That's what colonialism is. It's the perpetuation forward of the Roman trauma into the whole entire planet, instead of just an area of North Africa, West Asia, and parts of Europe. Because the Roman Empire didn't get all the way into Asia, it didn't get all the way into Russia, didn't get south beneath Ethiopia, it didn't go all the way down, and then it reach all the way into India and into obviously Turtle Island, or North Central South America. But the Roman trauma did hit. Right, it was an explosion of violence, and an explosion of unhealed lifeways, economic, social, religious, spiritual, political ways of control of society. Right, the way the British organized their parliament, the way that they talk about themselves, right? The French talk about themselves. They're the inheritors of the Greeks and the Romans. The way that the Americans talk about themselves, they're the inheritors of the West, the Western civilization. Right, that's why they keep making movies about. They're great, right? Like that's what Gladiator is. That's what 300 is, right? Why do they keep making movies about this, right? It's because they don't want to heal from that. Like I don't think that nobody consciously doesn't want to heal from that, but they don't know how to, or they haven't done it for whatever reason, right? Why do you keep telling stories about going into indigenous, where the Gaelic people are, where many indigenous peoples were in Germany, the Germanic tribes? Why do you tell stories about going and wiping out all those peoples and forcefully installing a capitalist oligarchy based upon slavery and plunder, right? That's what the Roman Empire was. Why do you keep telling stories about that, right? Why does Elon Musk think about Rome so much? Why does even the liberals, they teach the classics. They teach the classics. The conservatives and liberals are bipartisan, right? If you go to a New York upper crust blue states school or just a public school, you're gonna learn about these great Greek and Roman peoples and how great they were and how amazing their democracy was. That was never democracy. Most of the society never actually had equal rights or the ability to vote in anything. Because most of society was women and basically non-Hellenic, which is basically black and brown people who did the slave work. So that history, right? That's why they built the U.S. Capitol in the shape of a Greco-Roman. They even call it the Greek history, our great Greek history. They built it in the same architectural style because they've never healed from that. They never actually fixed the problems that goes all the way back to those societies. The liberals' job is to convince everybody that they have healed. This bulging lump that's chewing on your rib cage and your heart, it's inside of your brain. That's not cancer. You know it's a very nice lump. Lumps have the right to defend themselves. You know what I'm saying? Neoplasms in your shin, right? It's your lymph node isn't expanding, and you're not emaciated and sick, and you don't have excruciating pain in your body. That's not pain in your body. That's not pain in your body. That is just a figment of your imagination, right? The liberal is the tumor. The liberal is the half of the human spiritual civilizational tumor that gaslights the body, right? And the conservative is the attack dog. No, we don't have any problems here. Don't you see how democratic we are? Look at our beautiful country with its unelected, with its completely unjust seizure of American citizens in Chicago. What are you talking about? Human rights. Look at all of these great human rights we brought to Vietnam and Iraq, and look at what we're bringing to the Middle East. Look at the human rights that we brought to Africa in AFRICOM. Right? That's the job of the liberal, is to convince the body that it doesn't need to use its white blood cells to remove the hostile entity. That's what Western history is for. That's what universities are for. Western universities is there to make sure that everybody, is appropriately unaware of the deep structural problems in their society. And if they get too aware of it, well, they'll never work again. And then how are you going to survive in the tumor when you can't afford your $100,000 worth of health care, your $2,500 a month mortgage if you got a mortgage, your Klarna speculative real estate bubble pumping burrito mortgage? How are you going to afford your burrito loans? Did you know that the electrical companies are sending everyone emails now? Are you not being paid to work full time? One of the hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of government workers, while a broken American plutocratic duopoly of Democrats and Republicans fight over the Affordable Care Act, which gave Americans unaffordable, absolutely catastrophically bad, unaffordable health care, despite being called the Affordable Care Act, and also mass death and illness, left Americans sick and bankrupt, right? It wasn't even working, but they're fighting over that. And American soldiers are literally flooding food banks. Food banks are running out of food. Government workers working in national parks to just regular Department of Motor Vehicle offices, basic government services are collapsing because the United States, Hawaii had universal health care in 1859, by the way. So we are the first country in the world. So America should have just copied us rather than trying to smother us. But, the United States is a unhealed descendant of the Roman trauma. It can't deal, and it doesn't know how to heal itself. That's why it couldn't learn from Hawaii. It had to try to forcefully occupy and then defund our universal healthcare system because healed tissue is a threat to a cancerous lesion. A healthy arm is a threat. You know what I mean? To the neoplasm, to the foreign invader. Any indigenous, meaning from there, right? Material, and especially indigenous material, whether that's the Vietnamese Viet Cong or Viet Minh, whether that's the anti-imperialists in China that kicked out many nations, whether that's the Haitian Revolution, whether that's indigenous people resisting their own ongoing genocide in America, Native Americans, the resistance to the cancer tissue, or the resistance to the COVID spike protein, right? That is always the violence, and that always has to be crushed, right? And so actually Hawaii building an example of what an advanced indigenous. I actually have an album. Speaking of music, I have an album called Indigenous Aloha Civilization. That's actually partially there's a song that's just about what Hawaii was before the Western American imperial capitalist system invaded and destroyed deeply harmed and subjugated our culture, right? So this is actually an album, and that's actually the screen graphic for that Neofeud. The one of the areas in the veteran civilization in Neofeud 2 is based upon some ideas I had for like what a future Hawaii would look like, which is what a past Hawaii would look like, with slightly different material characteristics, but with similar spiritual, economic, and social characteristics. But yeah, anyway, so if you like music, this is an album all about that. There's actually one song that's called Indigenous Aloha Civilization. That's actually the entire history of Hawaii, where the U.S. invaded, occupied our country, destroyed our mass transit, high-speed rail, socialist, nationalized renewable technology, and then banned our language and culture. So, but anyways, so when there's so all of that is all part of what Neofeud 2 is also about. It's about this and it's extremely complex, right? Because everyone is in a different place. Like, everyone sees things differently. I'm not saying the way I see things is the right way to see it. This is just the way that I see it. As a pattern of, as a weaving and a wafting of carbon, phosphate, and silicon. Well, I'm not made of silicon, except my cyberpunk back. I need a cyberpunk back made of silicon so that I can not have excruciating back pain. That will speed up the dev time on these games. But anyways, as somebody that has lived in the world as a Hawaiian under U.S. imperial genocidal occupation, which I can have, you can go look up what that actually means, but it involves many things, not just mass death and mass unaliving, or what is actually genocide is. The attempt to eradicate in whole or in part, and to actually remove a culture, a people, language, like genocide is when a malignant cell, like a malignant melanoma or a malignant, breast tissue or malignant prostate cancer, right? When it spreads into a new area, like when prostate cancer migrates through your body and spreads into your hip, right? Your hip needs to help your body stabilize, right? You don't need a prostate where your leg connects to your torso. You don't need that, right? And that's what genocide is on a civilizational scale. It's the nose of Rome. No offense if you have a Roman nose, but the Roman nose tissue, like a nose cancer that starts to invade and replicate, and it's spreading, or maybe it's a prostate cancer. So this is very patriarchal. Right? It's very hyper-testosteronated. It's toxic masculine, Greek and Roman culture for sure. Definitely a patriarchy. Women didn't count as people. So it's the Roman prostate cancer. It's a prostate cell replicating inside of what was once indigenous people of Britain. The British are all one. The British don't have a real historical creation story, right? They kind of, Merlin and all the King Arthur, that is a made up story. That's actually part of the scarification. That's a civilization. The history of Britain itself, Britannia, is part of the human scarification of the cancerous lesions of the Roman legions that eradicated what was indigenous. The people that actually originated from that land of Britain had it wiped out. And so this kind of like this feeling of the need to belong and to feel like I came from somewhere, like where did I come from, right? And then they invented this story about the magician and the wizard. A lot of this draws from some like vaguely remembered ideas that they had previously and from other cultures that they've read about. But there is no origin story to the British because the British are people that they were annihilated, like they were genocided. Like the Americans genocided Native Americans and other peoples across the earth, but they were wiped out. As it's not about killing any particular individual or number of individuals. It was about wiping out the stories and the history and the culture of the indigenous people on that island called Britain. In the Gaelic, in the Irish, and there's all of these other peoples that have not fully been wiped out. Scotland, that has, they have their own stories that they can go back to, right? Because they were not fully conquered. But for the people, especially in the southern British island, they were annihilated, and what replaced them has never recovered from that. You know what I mean? They've never recovered. That's why the British Empire. That's part of why the British Empire became the British Empire, is because when cancer installed itself, I mean, not in any individual, not in their DNA, but in their mind, right? The way of life is to take, to kill, to crush, to control. Right? If American Western capitalist culture is a culture of greed, conquest, barbecues, and football, it's like McDonald's with machine guns, and then becoming the richest person in that's a non-culture. It's a Western white culture, right? American-led Western culture. Britain is tea, unsalted meat. It's like tea, crumpets, fish and chips, and conquest. It's like starving millions of Irish and Indians, controlling, and then what is there other than to aspire to escalate up this ladder? Like, where is the connection to the land? Where's the connection to any positive history that isn't full of lies and half-truths? It doesn't exist. Why doesn't it exist? Because to be honest about the history of the British and the French empires, and etc., right? You have to constantly be lying about it. You have to constantly be covering up and filling it with these cracks and these fake origin stories. That's why colonizers like indigenous peoples, because they like trying to latch onto someone else's healed culture that to have some kind of place and some kind of a healed, a reciprocal people that didn't damage and crush and destroy others. They want to go back to something that feels like a home, because the colonizer has no home, They can't go back home, right? They have to jump into black struggles. They have to jump sometimes to culture appropriatively, right? That's why That's what they call that cultural appropriation and trying to take on the mantle of the oppressed, right? The oppressor can't ever really go home because their home is barbecues, dead bodies, and loveless marriages, and empty pursuit of wealth, and just a literal hollow husk. So you can't go home. You have to try to jump into indigenous cultures and put on the feather headdress, put on the. I mean, if you support Palestine, that's a great thing. But there's a need. Like even James Cameron has this need to wear the face of the indigenous people, like in Avatar. Because there isn't a place to go back to, Now, but ultimately, I'm not saying there's no possible way to fix that problem, but it is a problem. The colonizer and the unhealed people. Part of the tumor's defense mechanism is to convince the body that there is nothing to fix. America is fine. Europe is fine. Capitalism is totally fine, normal, nay, inevitable. The capitalist system, colonialism, right? As Orwell said, I do not apologize for, the enslavement of black people. I do not apologize for the crushing of the red genocide of the red nations of the Americas. I do not apologize for what has happened to Palestinians. I do not apologize for what has happened to Asians. Lesser races were conquered by the great white race. The great white race. That was Churchill. He's supposed to be some kind of hero for the liberals. It's kind of funny though. He talks about everyone was less concerned with masking it, who they really were in the West in the early 20th century. They were less concerned with that. Nowadays, they're more concerned with that. pretending to be good people. Uh, but like you can pretend like this is inevitable, but as it was once said, the wretched of the earth, this will rise up eventually, and it will right itself. Now it's not necessarily inevitable. The West could win, and all life on Earth could cease to exist. Like sometimes cancer wins. Sometimes cancer wins. Sometimes Rome wins. When Britain is the result of Rome winning. Britain is the result of evil winning. It's when cancer won, and then it created Britain, and they created France. And when Britain wins again, it creates self-colonizing people from India, or self-colonizing people around the world, right? When people speak English, and then they not just speak English, but like abide by all the Western colonial ways. When Hawaiians take off their Hawaiian clothes and put on American shirts and talk about just try to be capitalist Western Americans and just have football, they all join the U.S. military. That's Rome winning, right? It's saying the world can become prostate cancer. Everything can become cancer. Everyone and everything can take and take and take and give nothing back and pursue infinite growth, mindlessly and thoughtlessly, without reciprocity. Everything can become cancer, right? If America wins, then the whole world dies. Right, literally. Again, it's like you can ask the environmental scientists. That's why scientists have a hard time in the West, because if you really study what you're studying, that's what universities are for, to control scientists, so they can't get funding if they want to do something good. Because if you actually study thermodynamics and basic biology and ecosystems, then you're going to realize that, especially if you study things like maybe not necessarily astronomy, but if you study biology, you study environmental science. You study even certain kinds of earth sciences, you're going to realize, oh my gosh, we're going to make all life on Earth extinct if we follow our system, right? And then you get into an existential crisis, and that's what liberals are there for. No, it's okay because we're going to cop out 27. It's okay if you just vote blue, scientists. Keep doing your science, because how are we going to beat China if you don't do your science? Keep doing your science. Once you vote blue enough, all those discrepancies you see, all the Antarctic ice cores that are screaming at you the truth that, that your country, your people's, your white capitalist Western system is causing the world's death, right? When you look at the rate and the carbon emissions and you look at the numbers, right? Yes, you're a scientist, but it's okay because the the liberal is here, right? The cancer cells jester is here to tell you that everything's going to be better once you vote this Democratic Party. It's all going to be in, right? It's all going to get better, I swear. But that's also why, just voting blue is never going to, just turning to that's why the liberal is very dangerous. That's why Malcolm X, who is a member of an oppressed, traumatized collection of civilizations, the African peoples, right, correctly pointed out the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere is the moderate white liberal, because it is what keeps all of that going. It's that not that not any individual person. It's not something wrong with their DNA or something, because that would be eugenics and fascism. But the ideology and the way of thinking and what they are doing, what the kind of communication and the kind of basically lying. Ultimately, even if they're lying to themselves, they don't even realize it. But the kind of weaponization of words and weaponization of rhetoric and belief and human language itself. That's what Noam Chomsky pointed out, right? All of that is the most dangerous thing, because then that can allow it to persist, right? Again, like if cancer waved a big flag, if cancer cells had a really easy target that said this. I am prostate cancer, so that anywhere in your body, right, your immune system could immediately target. That's part of why cancer rates are increasing, is because here's a little PSA, mask up, because guess what? It actually there's no evidence that shows that when you get COVID, especially multiple times, it damages your immune system and then it increases the cancer rates of various kinds, including various intestinal cancers, pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, all kinds, because your immune system does actually partially is partially what helps your body to respond to cancer, because it has to identify cells that have run amok, right? But if cancer cells spoke to you, if cancer cells all like had a really obvious way to say, I am a cancer cell, eradicate me. Like if there's a giant polka dot spotted, like if there was like a star spangled marker, right, in the cytokines, in the if there was a star spangled or like a big C marker, in the reticulum, or in the mitochondria, right, or somewhere on the external cell wall, that antibodies could easily identify and say, oh, I have to get rid of that, right? So your T cells and your immune system, right, could send its soldiers in to remove that. Then cancer would die quickly, right? But cancer doesn't persist because it shows you who it is. It really makes a big, menacing, dark, black cell. Cancer persists because cancer hides itself and masks itself as just another one of your regular cells. It's also how COVID spreads. It has a spike protein that is really good at fooling the barriers in your cells, so that they don't persist because they're so big and evil. The biggest evil persists because it's good at looking good. The biggest malice and the biggest problems persist because they make themselves look like solutions. Right? The colonial capitalist world would have been over 200 years ago, or maybe at least 70 years ago, right? If liberals didn't save it. That was literally Roosevelt's job, to save capitalism, not to stop the problem. It was to mask, right? It was to give enough concessions so that the rich oligarchy of a minority of white rich guys, all of Roosevelt's time. The Roosevelts made mountains of money. The Delano Roosevelts, they made massive amounts of money, narco trafficking and plundering all of America and also China and the rest of the world. From New York City, it's an old, rich American family. It's an old piece of tumor tissue, right? And the Roosevelts that were going to go extinct with the rest of their wealthy oligarchy during the communist and socialist highest high water point in the United States, shortly following the Russian Revolution, which was an example, which was dangerous for the world, because again, any healed tissue, right? The Russian Revolution was dangerous because any healed tissue in the biosphere, in the human civilizational network, any healed tissue is a threat, especially healed tissue that is pushing back strongly against the cancer. That's why all revolutions have to be stopped. Any actual successful socialist. So the word revolution always means death, destruction, and it's when Venezuelans were first. They were starved to death by Hugo Chavez or Maduro when central government planning caused crop failures, and then Maduro shot everyone with narco trafficking guns while he was snorting 6,000 tons of cocaine. Right? But you have to always stop the healed tissue. The Nobel Peace Prize is a Nobel War Prize. The cancer's plant is she's actually the opposition party in Venezuela, was just given a Nobel Peace Prize by the same criminals that mask themselves. The Nobel Peace Prize is a perfect example of unhealed colonial non-indigenous civilization masking itself by calling a prop to justify war, literally. War on Venezuela by United States and NATO and the U.S. and all of its vassals, sending aircraft carriers and destroyers down there right now. I don't think they're going to win, but it's literally the Nobel War Prize, but it masks itself as the Nobel Peace Prize, right? Because if you give her that prize, it justifies invading and destroying, right? It justifies Vietnam War 3. Vietnam War 2 was Afghanistan. Vietnam War 3. Call of Colonialism, Venezuela. Call of Duty's probably already made a game called Call of Duty, let's steal all of Venezuela's. Oh, I'm sorry, bring democracy to Venezuela. So all of that talk about democracy, humans, freedom, that is the cancer cell's cloak. That is the West's cloak. And so many liberals, I'm sure people are going to be mad in the comments. They're going to say, Silver Spook, Joseph Guevara Stalin Maduro the Seventh, he starved 865 trillion Americans, and he starved British people who all lived in Venezuela. My daddy was a Venezuelan, and also Mao Tse Xi Jinping, he killed at least 8 billion Uyghurs. Oh my gosh, what are you even talking about? So that's, and then you're infected already. You start saying that kind of stuff, you're already infected with. You've been converted. You've joined the masked cancer. Not necessarily you're like evil and you just everything about you is wrong. But you have mentally, culturally, ideologically, in terms of your mind, what you believe in the world. You're already a part of it. That's why it's very dangerous. It's so dangerous. Anybody is susceptible to that kind of stuff. People are also susceptible to conservatism and fascism, especially people that have lower educational attainment. And if you got COVID 10 times in a row, it decreases your ability to be conscious of anything. And then you have simpler narratives. For people who have alcoholism, brain damage, and or COVID, omeletification of the neurons and microthrombosis, which is statistically actually shows that you go further and further to the right, the more times you get reinfected, and the more trauma to your brain. So for those that are more to the right, cancer has a very simple way. It can just reach into your reptilian brainstem and pull you right up and just go, join the cops, join the police, join MAGA, and it's just that's easy. But the liberal, it's a little more complicated. But if you want to compete with advanced indigenous civilizations like China and socialism and Chinese characteristics, you want to compete with the multipolar world. You can't just have a bunch of grunt. We're watching Alien, so they call them pejoratively grunts, like Mr. Michael Bean's Corporal Hicks. But you can't just have a bunch of Marines. You can't just have a bunch of people. You gotta have people that are able to produce advanced. You gotta have somebody able to produce 1 nanometer chips and all the various ecosystem of high technological products that goes along with that. If you don't have that, right, you gotta have some South Korean do it. You're losing India. China is not going to send any more. Scientists are getting too smart. There's not enough liberal Chinese in Shanghai to, with a PhD in artificial intelligence and computer science to import to San Francisco, or Texas or wherever they're going to put the next data center that's going to try to kill the world with broken, malfunctioning AI. So, anyway, okay, that's like not about Neofeud 2, but it is about Neofeud 2. Hey, what's up, Grant? So, but yeah, if anybody has a specific question, I'll try to actually read it. Holly, nobody asked any Neofeud 2 specific questions, huh? No. Okay, there we go. Okay, but what's up to Gio and Grant? This is supposed to be more interactive. I'm kind of not doing that. I know. But it's that's a lot of what's going on. But yeah, I'm working on the music. One thing I want to say about that is this is a really big part for me. Back to the game stuff is like this indigenous, like basically there's a line in Neofeud 2 where it says we outlawed commodity speculation before Earth's main sequence star exited its birth phase. Right before the supernova that gave birth to before the supermassive mother that gave birth to the iron and the carbon molecules in your body, right? Exhaled its interstellar breath, right? Because that's how every element, other than hydrogen and helium, every element, almost all the heavy elements in your body, were all formed in a supernova that happened a long time ago. So the indigenous people, this indigenous civilization is like, before the molecules in the stardust that formed you were created, we already banned commodity speculation and accumulation, the unhealed economic life way of of trading of trading economic monetary units for tulips, or we hear you and we hear the young Roman engages in the non-fungible token and the crypto trade. We banned that activity billions of years ago. So like trying to like figure out what that kind of civilization sounds like, and what they kind of like look like. I want the music to match their because they're kind of like a godlike race. They're like a I'm listening to a lot of Star Trek, Star Wars. The alien theme is actually important as well because they kind of look like xenomorphs. Because in Neofeud 1, the Terminator, right, which is kind of this scary skeletal killer machine, right, that's coming to kill you and absolutely what kind of stop. All of that is actually in the world of Neofeud 1. It's like rebranded. That's all propaganda to try to demonize sentient machines, to justify killing them, enslaving them, cracking down on them. And then the Aliens movies in Neofeud 2, the alien movies where these insectile, skeletal, acid for blood, razor sharp teeth, killer species that explodes out of your rib cage when it's young or birds, right? All of that is anti-indigenous alien. It's indigenous alien species propaganda to demonize a socialist indigenous ancient civilization that happen to have carapaces. They happen to have elongated skulls, and they kind of look a little scary to humans, right? And maybe they have eggs, right? They're not alien, they're not xenomorphs, but it's like in order to justify trying to blow up their entire, in order to justify Agent Oranging all their forests, carpet bombing all of their cities, enslaving their people and stealing all their resources, they created the Aliens movie, and then the entire series is just a bunch of propaganda. I mean, obviously, Aliens movie is not in the real world, but you know what I'm saying. So that's the kind of universe that Neofeud 2 and Neofeud 1 is. So I wanted to kind of like to have like this I want their music to kind of like sound a little bit off-putting, or like not off-putting, but like it has to sound like definitely different and strange compared to the human utopian civilization. Oh, the other thing is because the indigenous civilization, they don't like, they respect all life, and they are like living in win-win cooperation, not just with other cultures from other planets and other species across the galaxy and other galaxies and other dimensions, but they not only do they like, they also like they have their species has equilibrium with other plants and animals, right, around them, and that's why there's all this green. And I made a real big point of having the green and the flourishing areas in the city, around the city, because this is one of their this is their capital city that you're looking at. They have other areas in their massive civilization, but so there are no birds. There are no dogs in the Western galaxy, like in Neofeud 2. I'll show you. So like in the Neofeud 2, in the Western capitalist city, you have no, like this one, right? There's the sound of. Sorry, I'm trying to get this out. There's a sound of cops. There's a sound of tear gas canisters. There's a sound of people screaming. There's a sound of anger. There's a sound of resentment. There's a sound of jackhammers. There's a sound of cement, right, being cracked. There's a sound of, basic construction, right? Or sometimes not that much construction because they're running out of money. But there is no life. There's no insects. There's no plants. There's no dogs, birds, cats. There's no sheep. Androids can dream of sheep, but there is no actual sheep, right? And there's no wind, there's no trees, there's no water. There's no water. Water's all gone. Water is life to indigenous cultures like Ola Ikavai. Water is expensive and for polluting for the Western capitalist. So water is gone. There's no water, right? So and so Neofeud. So I want to make it really like when you go to this Western city, and then you come to this the indigenous civilization. I'm in the soundtrack. This is when I'm composing the soundtrack. I want to have like birds and wind in the trees. You hear leaves. Like, there's no trees. There's no living things in the Western capital. They've destroyed it all. They've destroyed all their ecology. They've carpet bombed, destroyed, cut down, sold it for profit, burned it, spilled jet fuel into it. It's all dead. Even the people are commodities. There are no funerals in the Western capital. There's no funerals. When you die, your body is upcycled into a more efficient tool in a capitalist machine. You know, you're interchanged with AI, and then your molecules are broken down. You're literally the dead humans and dead organics get broken down and intravenously fed into their neighbors living in these micropodments. Like when you die trying to fund your insulin bill, you die diabetic ketoacidosis, playing Call of Colonialism or Grand Theft Astro, you know, for like 30 days straight, in order to get Twitch stream donos and Kickstarter to kickstart your replacement organs. If you die, you just get ground up and fed to your neighbors. There's no funerals. There's no real families. There's no robots, sentient machines. If you don't meet your payment, your entire consciousness just gets deleted. You just disappear. You cease to exist. And then your body gets repossessed and they're reprogrammed. So there are conscious machines, but you don't die. Your terms of service is violated, and then if you run out of money, your existence expires, and then your whole body is repossessed. Not like Repo Man, but like your robotic existence rent, if it's not met, right? You just the corporation just takes control of who you were, and now you're gone, right? Your shell might even look the same, but whoever you were inside, all your memories, all of your life, your personal, you like playing guitar, you spent a good amount of time being a go-go dancer at Micro Chippendales for robophiliacs, and you like playing frisbee with your robot dog. When you run out of money, you just cease to exist. Nobody cries for you. You're not allowed to cry. You're not allowed to cry. In fact, the corporation might just delete all of your family and friends out of your network. Just kind of like how they're deleting everyone's family and friends and everyone they were connected to by forcing you to make a AI therapist friend, right? That also tells you to unalive your neighbors and yourself. So when you go to the indigenous civilization, you hear the sound of trees and birds, and people have funerals. Like, people have celebrations. People have weddings and funerals. Nobody can afford to have a funeral or a wedding in America anyway. Too expensive. Nobody can mark the death and passing of their loved ones. Too expensive. Nobody wants to remember that everybody just died, because everyone went around collectively spread a BSL level 3 pathogen, right? So we don't even want to remember that we're all complicit in why those people are having why bother having a funeral. I mean, it's also dangerous to have a funeral if you're conscious of that. But in the indigenous civilization, people have lives, people have deaths, so I want under like the sounds of celebration. There's sounds of like there's no culture in Utopia, really, right? The culture is just like shooting people in a video game, football, and barbecues. But it's really cheap barbecues, because nobody can afford a full-on barbecue. You take a scorp rat, you put it on a stick, and you light it over, you cook it over a trash can fire. So, but it's like the end stage of the football barbecues, colonialism, Western white culture, and so that you mostly get the sound of upset, angry people fighting with each other, people fighting with cops, the sirens, automobile traffic, right? And then you get and there's like the Blade Runner Blade Runner blues. They have a lot of like Blade Runner, like sad dystopian cyberpunk hell world music from Neofeud 1. But when you exit, then you got birds and trees and plants. And I actually have a sound of a sheep buying. It's kind of like in the indigenous socialist civilization, in the billion-year-old indigenous socialist civilization, this alien culture where healthcare is free, where the housing is free, where they can snap their fingers and recharge your body with like, the artificial suns that are just in micro tokamak cells that are just floating around, levitating across the city in case anybody needs electricity. So everything is basically virtually free in this in the indigenous civilization, as it is in actual historical and modern advanced indigenous civilizations. Now they do work, and they do engage in competition of various kinds, but like all their basic needs are free, right? And so then that's shocking, right? When the Western capitalist member exits and they come to this place, they're like, oh my God, what? Literally, it causes him to go into shock, and he collapses and turns unconscious because when he finds out his healthcare is free. That's like one of the scenes. And so then, but then there's also, you don't have to dream of electric sheep. You don't have to like try to save the animals. We have some like animal and plant lovers in the some of our members in the Discord, and so you don't have to dream about doing that. It just is done. It just is. You don't have to dream about electric sheep. You don't have to dream about having a real owl or a real sheep. You just go outside and there's sheep and owls. And they're just around. I mean, you also have warp gates, and you have advanced high-speed rail, and if you want to play video games and have computer. If you want iPhone, they have better iPhones. They have Huawei phones. It's much better. Higher resolution, transmits through 30 feet of concrete, tri-foldable screen, cost 10 times less. They have super, I'm partially joking, but I'm kind of not, because part of this inspiration is how the world has been, and I did believe that this was how the world would change. It is how it's changing because I am an oracle. No, I'm just kidding. I predict the future, and it always comes true, for better or for worse. I'm trying to predict good things. That way, if I say all these good things, then when it comes true, then you're in for a better ride. If I just keep, part of the reason why I can't just do pure cautionary cyberpunk dystopia is because I don't want everyone to just have to like swim through raw sewage to get to their 6 gig jobs working as an AI input giver, right? You sit there and just like, I'll put your creative work into an AI and then watch it die. I don't want you to have to just live in that. That doesn't sound too fun. But yeah, so it's kind of like having a more, having the sound profile have living things and life and plants and animals that don't exist in a capitalist dystopian Western hellscape, and then having it be like really sound different. But also like at the same time, this is the hard part, is like having it also sound like science fictional and sound like what does that sound like? What is it? 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm like thinking about like Star Trek, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Alien. I went back and listened to all these. Like I like the Protoss theme from StarCraft because, one thing is that one aspect of these alien races, they are psionic. Like they have those abilities. They can speak with their mind telepathically, and and that like the Protoss, they're like advanced beyond the human Terran society and StarCraft, right? So there's some similarities. They're different in other ways, but they do have that. So like I was kind of like using that as some of the inspiration for it. But like 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? Because Dave in 2001: A Space Odyssey goes to space, right? And there's just kind of like, it's a series of quantum leaps, right? Or these jumps forward in the progress that's mysteriously being puppeted or being pushed by an invisible hand. Right, you don't, in 2001: A Space Odyssey, certainly in the movie, you don't know who or what exactly, right, is creating and placing those black monoliths, right, in which these jumps forward in the human evolution is happening. Because is it evolution if they push you forward, or is that intelligent design? Well, there's an intelligence out there, but you don't know what it is, right? So like the 2001: A Space Odyssey is definitely one of the like when I'm building the themes for the music, like when I made the Neofeud soundtrack, just as an example, the way that I kind of went about composing it. I mean, this is one thing that's really a bit stressful now because I'm trying to make sure that Neofeud 2's music. I haven't composed this music in like 8 years, so I'm trying to make sure I can still pull out. It takes a lot of energy and creative. It takes like a lot of my brain. It's good because I get to use more of my brain, but it takes like all of my brain and creative power to do this. But to make the Neofeud soundtrack, and it also takes like all of my RAM and my ROM and all my hard drive space and all of my all of my sectors and my partitions, and all of my available compute power, as they say. America don't, the West don't got none. So, but luckily for me, I have just enough compute power. Unlike Sam Altman, on my computer to make sure I get the soundtrack. Anyway, long story short, when I was composing the soundtrack though, like this, the Neofeud soundtrack, I remember like I was like trying to, have themes that kind of reference various elements that are also referenced in the scenes, like the sentient machines, the Chrome Boys and Protege. Their theme kind of sounds a little bit like the Terminator theme. Like in parts, it kind of sounds a little bit like Terminator. Some of it sounds a little bit like Deus Ex. There's like because that's one of my favorite cyberpunk games. This like aspects of a certain melodies kind of sounds like that. There's like the I-beam of like a hammer hitting metal, like in Terminator, like the ding 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 ding, like that actual sound is in places. There's like what sounds like the Doom gun and the gun from Doom shooting, and then there's like the 14.4 modems, and like just random metal screeching, metal chains falling down, like robotic sounds of various kinds. But then they're kind of like all of it's kind of blended out together into the music itself. And then I remember for for the Neofeudals, the ones that live in the sky palaces, they're I wanted it to sound like very like definitely Euro, definitely like regal, like everyone here is extremely rich, and we're like wearing like people that wear crowns and people that go to G7 summits. It's like elevator music and pretentious orchestral music. It's like the music signifying the plutocracy, the oligarchy, aristocracy, feudal upper crust. Like what. And so I remember like thinking about like how exactly do we signify these people? Some of it kind of sounds like a Blade Runner-y because it's a science fiction game, and it's like Blade Runner inspired certainly. But I remember like thinking like it's like really trying to choose the instruments specifically to match the characters, the elements in the scenes, and like also like where things, because Neofeud, as I said, is like very like meta, and it deals with a lot of the literary, the cinema, the pop culture, and the game culture, and the history around all of these topics. It's not just dealing with what if robots were conscious, right? It's like Neofeud deals with all of humanity's thoughts and humanity's products and human culture thinking about what if robots were conscious, right? So like Isaac Asimov, all that is part of the Neofeud. Those are like the Lego blocks from which Neofeud is built in part. It's like how humanity thinks about the future. Obviously, partially how the West thinks about the future, but it's just not just the West thinks about that. It's about how people think about conscious machines through Terminator. Right? It's not just about like what if there were killer machines, but like how the movie Terminator and its cultural impact has echoed across time through the last several decades. Like how has that impacted human society and how people think about the future? Because it does. Like that's all that, like to me, that like it's hard to really talk about that in a way really hard to talk about that. I don't think you could really do Neofeud as a movie in that way and have the same impact. There's something about the game. I think something about the game world, the game format, especially like the indie game, adventure game format. That's kind of how it had to be told, because it requires a lot of like talking, and you want some visuals, but you don't want like it has to kind of be kind of surreal, because you can just get caught up on the basic nitty gritty of making action scenes and making scary robot bits, and you can't really say everything you want in like a Terminator movie or like in a science fiction movie or TV show. And in a book, there's a lot you can do too, but there's some things that are also hard to do even in books. So I feel like Neofeud is about also the relationship to all these cultural phenomenon. Like I already brought up, like there's movies in Neofeud. The movies in Neofeud are themselves movies that are demonizing robots, right? But it's also like that's also commentary on how the TV show Cops was a show to demonize black and brown and poor people to justify exploding police budgets and the crime bill and filling the U.S. prison industrial complex prison system, like system, right? Actually, I was just reading Virtual Light, right? And the main characters of that are cops. And there's a show called Cops in Trouble, right? Cops, the TV show, came out. Why did the Cops, the TV show, come out? It was to help quadruple America's prison population, right? So when the Terminator movies are themselves a commentary on all of Hollywood and American and Western television, which are all themselves propaganda to justify over-policing. And what Rodney King was about. It was about an explosion of over-policing as a process of locking up any resistance, especially black resistance, to a racist capitalist colonial system. Right? So it's kind of like, how do you talk about the media that is talking, how do you talk about the world that we live in which media itself, not just the movies don't exist separate from, like, robots don't just exist in the world, and then the possibility of robots attacking us like Terminator or Skynet, like, that's not what the world actually is like. The world is full of media products. Most people are looking at screens like half the day or more. Right? People are consuming, it's the modularity and simulacra of the simulacra. People are consuming media about what the world is kind of like or could be like all the time. So how do you deal with people that are consuming news media, social media, Twitter posts, YouTube videos, TV shows like Cops, right? Or other pro-propaganda shows, which is most TV shows. There's like 6 networks that are all giant conservative or liberal imperial capitalist conglomerates. Like Disney is just one of them. Then you got the Paramount, CBS, Larry Ellison. You've got I was listening to one from Black Liberation Media, Sinclair Network. All of them have a program that they have an agenda they're all pushing. Fox News has its own grouping, but they're all like working together ultimately with slightly different investor groups. Exactly, it's slightly different specific millionaire special interest groups, but this is all part of the control mechanism, right? So how do you talk about what do you call it hyper reality, or this is all kind of words that they describe it, postmodern reality, where you have the signifiers. The signified is like so deeply separated from layers of the signified is separated by so many signifiers and so many signs and symbols and re-representations of things, right? But how do you actually talk about that inside of a video game? Or how do you talk about that in fiction or in itself a media product, right? So that's where Neofeud is. There's people, some people have written, there's some PhDs in Baudrillardian and philosophy and studiers. There's a lot of Immanuel Kant and other, not just Kant. What's that other guy? Sartre. I don't care to speak too much French. Frida AES, but there's a lot of people that have actually written about that aspect of Neofeud. So, but that kind of I need to have something. It can't just be I don't want to just have it be I want the soundtrack to kind of reflect all of what is actually happening in the game. And so that's something that takes a lot of processing. Like, my computer has to process a lot, and my brain has to process a lot. You know what I mean? When I'm working on this stuff, there's a lot of things happening all at once. And so, anyway, that's some of what I'm doing. So what I'm trying to say is, when I am coming up with this music for this particular people, it's all these elements, all the science fiction elements. Like the kind of instruments, the kind of specific sounds to use. I got the sound like work gates, the sound of what black holes sound like, all those things are kind of all just kind of jumbling around in kind of a morass in my head, to try to figure out how exactly. Part of it is, it's been 8 years since I had to compose a soundtrack like Neofeud 1. I've made other music since then, but nothing as this needs to be the maximum quality. I made just some songs. I made some metal songs. I made Indigenous Civilization. And those are not bad music, but those are songs, songs that are sung and they have melodies. I'm not putting all my effort into making all the instrumentation and making it as complex as I want it to be, because, my main thing is making video games. But when I compose the music for the games, especially the flagship games like Neofeud and Neofeud 2, It's I really want it to be the maximum quality and the maximum effort, and I want to fit the world. And so so anyway. So one song is taking me like it's already taking me like 2 days basically. And what's part of it is once I establish like the profile of what this veteran indigenous civilization sounds like, then I can expand that to like when you enter their capital, when you enter just the street area, when you the just the general area. There's like a green scraper where there's free food and free housing and free water, and like there's anti-gravity technology that makes waterfalls go upwards. Parts of that, like I look at some of the images coming out of China, and there's like buildings with the entire side is a giant waterfall, and there are green scrapers everywhere. Like there's actually codes where you actually, in certain areas in China, you actually have to build, which is an indigenous socialist civilization, you actually have to build a certain amount of green space. So you have like plants and garden areas, and just tomatoes and bok choy and just greenery into a certain amount of all living space, and all the living space is super affordable as well. It costs less than for like 10 times the space. It costs less than like a broken rat infested meth lab in LA to get one apartment in a tier 2 city in China. They're living their best life over there. So so they actually have a rule. You have to have green scrape. You have to have green space, a certain amount of that in all urban areas. And that's how the streets are like that too. There's trees over all, like most of the sidewalks. And like in Vietnam, anywhere where there's unused space, there's always, like even in Hanoi and in Da Nang, like there's always some kind of gardening or planting of some kind going on. Even in the city, even in like financial district, like huge towers, like it's a different culture. It's like a different way of even looking at what cities are. Like the West doesn't even realize you don't have to arrange cities. Not just the U.S., even the British and the French cities, which are all collapsing, by the way. It's filled with rat piss and poverty, and then they're fighting over whether there's too many or not enough immigrants, and not dealing with their actual problems, which is that they're imperial, capitalist, racist, dying places. But like in Chinese, in the Vietnamese, and the eastern cities, like they're safe. There's like no theft. Imagine LA with no theft. Imagine LA with no violence, or like very little. Imagine LA or New York City or even Britain with no homelessness, right? Unimaginable, right? But that's because you're from a Western capitalist, just horrible perspective. You're from the unhealed descendant of Roman trauma. You're from the bad place, and so. But there is actually green space everywhere. So having that, like all of that incorporated together, and having that, that's where actually, like, that's why I say, like, I did a lot of talks about this about 2 or 3 years ago. I went on the Mexi's channel and talked about indigenous civilizations and indigenous futurism and Neofeud and Neofeud 2. And a shout out to also, Hill Agency by my friend Megan Byrne, which is one of the inspirations for this as well, because that's like an actual indigenous game where there is an indigenous future as well, where it's like a city, and there's a detective, but it's a city somewhere in unspecified North America or North Turtle Island, but it's a majority indigenous area, and the city is much more livable, and it's much nicer, and everybody actually knows each other. It's not like a lot of Western cities. People desire this anonymity, or they come there and become anonymous or want to be anonymous and disconnected from everyone. But you don't have to necessarily do that. But that is what happens in these capitalist imperial metropoles, right? But people don't need to all disconnect from each other because the population density is increased. You know what I mean? Like that's how you don't collapse. That's how you don't fall apart and then build like these unhealed life ways. Like for example, accumulating vast sums of wealth in a tiny minority of people's hands is by controlling, right? Obviously having a communist party helps to deal with capitalists. From the commanding heights, ordering, regulating, and directing economy and social and political all life. There's actually like all domain all recognizing that you have to do with all domains of existence and civilization and society, not just economic or not just, what West calls politics or governmental. You have to deal with everything. That's the way that indigenous civilizations like generally look at things. But that's not the way the separation of business and government, right? This is part of the fall of I would say the Euro and the Western world. It was when they said, oh, well, we have, yes, you can accumulate billions of dollars and infinite amounts of money basically over there, and then we also have a government over there, and those are separate, right? And the government is separate from business, and then you can create fights between people. You go like, well, I'm for the business and free market and no regulation, and I'm for government and lots of regulation, and you get people fighting over that, and you don't recognize it. Like all those are interconnected. Like places have trade and exchange, and you need some way to organize the production, and the government. Like what exactly does that mean when you say it's like how do you it's another obviously this like what even the word political means is so warped, right? Because it's not political, it's just business. I don't want any politics in my game business. But everything economic has a political side to it. Everything that is political has an economic side to it. There's things called political economy that you learn in college, but nobody ever like really understands that fully. It's like it's political economy. But, the if you have any sufficiently advanced corporatocracy is indistinguishable from government, right? That's part of what probably. James Cameron and Ridley Scott probably were trying. I don't know exactly what they're trying to say, but like literally, the whole Earth is taken over by 5 corporations in Alien Earth. But it's the ICC and aliens, right? So this idea that you have like this separated, I would say that's part of building an indigenous civilization. Is you have to have people that part of their understanding is that like. We don't like for I'm a native Hawaiian, right? For our Kanaka Maoli people, there's no like over here we have the business of taro farming, and over there is the government and the regulation of the taro farming. It's like those things. I mean, those were tied together. There was number one, the way that things were given was according to need. It was things were distributed according to need, and so there was less total need for markets as they exist. Now, of course, there wasn't the level of GDP of some other places, but to extent, markets can have markets and the ability for people to trade things, right, has been helpful and has been done for a long time. That's part of what the Silk Road was, right? But and also equating trade with capitalism, that's another way that cancer defends itself. Well, if you don't have CEOs and billionaires, we'll have no economy, there'll be no food, there'll be no nothing, because we are the job creators. Everything happens. Trade happens, work happens, because there's a handful of rich white guys. Basically. But if you see it like that is like the liberal, right? That is the cancer cell showing itself as fixed, repaired, necessary, right? Ingrained in human essence, right? Like this is human nature. Anytime a Westerner says this is human nature, right? That is the cancer putting up a shield and saying, I'm just like you. This is how everything is. We're all the same, right? The problems in the world are happening because, I don't know, Russia did it. Or China did it. Nowadays, they're having trouble doing that because China's too busy literally making more renewable technology and EVs and curing diseases than the whole rest of the world combined. It's not even close. Also, China is doing the greatest thing ever, which is demilitarizing the global death machine itself, the military-industrial complex in the U.S. and the Western Empire as a whole, by not allowing them to have basic, even secondary access to neodymium, niobium, antimony, any rare earth magnet that goes into any Lockheed Martin. 70 to 80% or more of all U.S. military products rely on first or secondary. Primary or secondary Chinese rare earth and rare earth refined minerals, superheat resistant magnets and such, right? So I mean, obviously, right? That's like if you and China has cities, China has businesses, China does trade. Like China does have problems with some of the wealthier members there. They know they have those problems. Right, but you don't have to have a country that is in collapsing economic straits, that is such a severe poverty, that's pushing wars across the planet, that has people, that has billionaires and then people living at like near third world levels of quality of life in the United States, you're falling into a civil war. America is just rated like more unsafe than like half the planet at this point. Right, it is. It's not a safe place to be. Anywhere you walk in America, you can be grabbed by the cops were never safe to begin with, but then you have full-on fascist, authoritarian ICE and federal. I talked about last week. The enemy within. Most of the United States is an enemy of the United States federal regime, the authoritarian dictatorship regime. That's But that Trump exists because of the racist, capitalist, colonialist, that entire system and all those ideologies, right? Liberals made Trump, just like liberals made Hitler. They literally funded and profited from him, especially the British and the French. Because fascism is the final tool of capitalism when it's in decay. So, which is, that's what liberals do, is they push that ideologies, and then you're going to get this blowback eventually. If Trump goes away, that's not going to solve the circumstances that brought him about. You could have something worse than Trump. Trump is just a gangster, selfish, ex-reality TV show host. Maybe you have somebody really, really who believes fully in ethno supremacy, or maybe wants to end the world. Right? Trump doesn't really want to start more wars. He's going to start them because the Western imperial system needs to do mass, again, genocide, to plunder, to steal resources, to profit the tiny minority, to keep the cancer of the earth going. That system, like a corporation, if you get rid of one executive, right, there's a million other people with no conscience, no morals, who have thrown their employees under the bus, like Burke, right? They sacrifice their own people for a percentage. They got people killed, they got people suffering, they deny people's health care so they could increase the profits of the corporation. There's a million people who are, have this horrible sociopathic lack of morality for whatever reason, tendencies, that are ready to jump into that executive's place. You get rid of Trump, you could have somebody just fully like Charlie Kirk, somebody like Stefan Molyneux. You could have somebody like, a far-right extremist, right, that literally believes in the Third Reich full on, right? Because Trump just reads Mein Kampf and then tries to win over the voter bases he can get. But you might have somebody that really believes in that stuff, So anyway, but China doesn't have that. They don't have far-right extremists that are going to be taking over the government. I mean, the U.S. keeps talking about China and Russia are about to have a coup any second now. They're always about to have a coup any second now. But it's the thing, like, if you have a system that actually is an indigenous healed civilizational system, not based around for infinite profit, crushing and exterminating, wiping people, this is why China had to be the place. It's the biggest, most successful, historically for 2,000 years, it's been the biggest economy on the earth for 1,800 of the last 2,000 years. It just is, it's unique in history, right? There's many other civilizations and indigenous peoples across the earth that have similar characteristics in many ways. Like North Turtle Island was very similar to China. They had many different, hundreds of different indigenous territories with their own languages. And then they had a universal hand sign language at Cahokia and other trading cities in North Turtle, which is extremely organized and well developed, despite what the West has lied about. After the Europeans killed 100 million Native Americans, lied about them. China had a universal, Mandarin is a universal language that anyone in the trading network speaks, and they also have 56 separate ethnic regions that have their own verbal languages. They have their own other spoken language. So everyone has two languages in China. Or not everybody, like most people, they have their culture and their people and their language from their home where they're from, which they've been from for thousands of years, right? The United States is a giant 250-year-old dying settler colony. So is Australia. So is New Zealand. So is Canada. They have nowhere to go to. Britain has some history, but Britain was based in genocide, like I already told you. So is France. It was based in the wiping out by the Romans of the people that were there. And they haven't really gotten back into some kind of equilibrium, a coexistence with themselves and their neighbors for the last 2,000 years. So, I mean, what they become. This is the thing. Some one of the colonizers pointed out, like, if the Americans and the Canadians and Australians and the colonizers can finally like work with the indigenous people on the land that they're at, or do some, it's hard to say exactly what it's going to take, but if they can build a justice rather than trying to keep it's rather than re-perpetuating and transferring to a new generation the old traumas that have been going through again and again, repeating their life ways of stealing, killing, plundering, making money, making profit, and trying to get a better barbecue and a nicer football and a George Foreman grill, and then just like living your life oblivious to your entire history and not trying to fix the wrongs of colonialism and capitalism and white supremacy by trying to dismantle all of that. Right? When the white populations actually try to dismantle all of that, if they actually fight, at least if you fight for it, you can pass to your children that I tried to stop it. Like, sincerely. And if you are able to dismantle it, then you will have then the Western unhealed descendant will finally heal, and then they'll have a root, right? A just origin story. You know, they'll have a cosmology. Like we have the Kumulipo. Hawaiians, we came from Kalo, and our older brother was Kalo. Papa Wakia, right, reigned upon the earth and gave birth to us. And this is our history, where we come from. This is our islands, and this is the, you know, nobody's history is not perfect. There were disagreements. Not everybody liked certain leaders on various islands, but like we know the history, and where there's wrongs, like we're ready to talk about it and try to ho'oponopono fix the wrongs. But if you're a colonizer, if you're an American, if you're really, really pro-American, if you're Australian, or, you know, if you're like, you know, there are ongoing, you know, crimes that you can watch on the TV screen for all of these countries, peoples, and systems of the racist capitalist colonial system, right? And so you know, when you start telling your history of who you are, it comes through all your slave-owning grandparents. It comes through all your uncles and your great uncles that like literally, you know, sold slaves, you know, went and pillaged countries, were in the British Navy and an American officer, you know, in the police, beating up on black and brown and poor people. To, you know, you committed genocide after genocide. So you can either lie, you're going to lie about it. And the thing is, it's not done. It's still going. It's still going. That's why the global South is rising up. That's why the global non-white world is rising up, right? Is because it's still going. That's what they're rising against. That's what Africa is rising against. That's what Palestinians are rising against. That's what China is stopping, because they were occupied and they became the fifth poorest country on the earth because of white colonial capitalism. From the biggest, successful, most prosperous places on the earth for 2,000 years to the poorest, right? So they have an origin story. They can go back and they say, this is who we are. We came from here. We fell very far. And then we had a revolution. We kicked out the capitalist colonizers. We rebuilt ourselves with great, great turmoil and struggle. Every Chinese can look back to their parents, right? And they can say, thank you so much, parents. Thank you so much, grandpa. And they can be honest. They don't have to lie about it. Unlike Americans, unlike Europeans, unlike all colonizers and settler colonizers who have to lie to their own children. And then when the children find the truth out, they either get extremely mad, they just deny it, and then bury it in drugs and expensive dinners and football and barbecues, right? And, oh, we won a war in Iraq. Oh, we didn't really lose in Vietnam. Or, oh, we're winning the trade war against China. How's that going? Is it going really good for you? This is the hilarious thing, is you're not even winning those. But you know what I mean? But so when all those injustices of those systems, even if you don't succeed at writing them all right now, at least you know, like those who fought the revolution, you can tell your children, this is what happened, this is what actually happened, and this is what we did, and this is how your grandpa died. Like Luna always, like, my grandpa died fighting empire. My grandpa died fighting a genocidal U.S. military that killed 1 million people just so that the rich could have more money and control the whole planet under American-led imperialism, right? Americans could never accept the Vietnam veterans back into their society because America, as part of America's lie, because the soldiers said, I don't even know why I was fighting the Vietnam War, right? As part of why Cameron and in Peacemaker, Army, Joel Kinnaman's dad actually like defected from the Vietnam War and fled to Sweden, right? I was just Peacemaker is another show that it kind of deals with a lot of these topics too. And I was just thinking of Alien, but James Cameron was like, yeah, you see from the generation, the boomer generation, that like many of them were sent off to go fight in this war. Why was I even there? When they came back to tell the story, hey, Americans, I don't even know why we were there. It was a really bad thing. Like, a bunch of us got killed. That's part of what Aliens is about. It's a space Vietnam. You go show up, an indigenous life on a place you get sent to blow up. It turns out you get your butt kicked because you don't want what you're doing, and rich people in charge with the military are just screwing you over, like Burke, for a percentage, right? So Americans most of the mainstream America could not accept, certainly the American mainstream and the American power, the American system could never accept the Vietnam War story, which is that we were the bad guys. And that's why they had to discard all the Vietnam veterans into the street to be homeless and shell-shocked and just withering away to dust. That's why biker gangs exist, because they had to the soldiers that came back had to try to make found families outside of the dead, cancerous Western imperial capitalist racist cultures who couldn't accept the truth of who they actually are, which is the death of the earth. And then they went back and had barbecues and football. And that was the 20th century, right? But that's why biker gangs exist, because the soldiers couldn't go back to their families. They couldn't even go back to their own families because the families have to lie about who America is and who the West is. You know, that's why it's like Jesse Ventura that's getting blacklisted from all of the U.S. media in 2000, because as somebody who was fought in America's dirty wars, he tried to tell the truth and he just got kicked off all the networks. So you know, but you know what I'm saying? So whereas in China and Vietnam, if you fought in a war, you can openly celebrate and be honest about it. Like, soldiers in Vietnam get accepted by their families. Like, families, the families who have soldiers in China and Vietnam, they are loved, accepted, and brought right back into the fold. Like, they're not all blowing themselves away 5 times more than already suicidal Western countries. They're full of suicide because it's a self-hating, lifeless, loveless place. The Chinese soldier they don't need to sleep out on the street because the country can't accept that they're the bad guy, because they're not the bad guy. Why is America the bad guy? Why is the West the bad guy, right? Well, the goal for the West, again, the liberal and the conservative goal, is just to never, ever, ever, ever talk about that and never be honest and just live as a cancer cell, live a lie forever, you know? And the question is, like, will the planet die because cancer wins? The human civilizational cancer wins. Will that? Can you hold Homo sapiens species together long enough to kill every single living thing? That's the question. Can you hold human species together with blood money, football, call of colonialism, video games, and Avengers? Right? Can you have enough? Can you have enough like anesthetized bullshit corporate media, fancy games, and expensive dinners, right? Can you keep capitalism going long enough for Elon and all of his techno king friends to destroy all life on Earth? Or will, you know, I don't know the answer to that. Or will the human species be able to get rid of the tumor and then preserve life on Earth beyond total extinction and not total annihilation, right? But that's the fight, right? It's literally, there's metastasis in the planet's body. And the China and the BRICS and the Belt and Road is the chemotherapy, you know, in the African Revolution and all of that, and indigenous resistance everywhere, including in Palestine. That's the chemotherapy of the life trying to save it. Like whether if the planet is a cancer patient, it's unknown. Like, I don't know exactly. I see a lot of the future, but I don't know if and exactly how the cancer patient that is the planet will survive this. I mean, obviously the physical, the dirt and the rocks, and many of our oldest elders, right, from a native perspective, the oldest elders will survive, and one day, you know, new patterns will be woven from the carbon and the phosphate and the molecules. When, as they say, when the fascists and the imperialists and the capitalists are composted, they will be. But will will everyone's life be unwoven, and all have to be remade in nuclear fire, in carbon mass carbon emission climate apocalypse because everyone's taking 65 trillion exahertz to pump out bad crypto coin and AI generated Donald Trump as God memes using Elon Musk and Peter Thiel's mega servers. Like the question is like I'm saying like one way or another things will survive, but it's not the human. I don't think it's the human species. It is the malignant, infinite growth, non-reciprocal, non-relational elements, not within each individual human organism, but within the human cultural zeitgeist and the human socio-political, spiritual milieu, right? It's like, will those systems, will those ideologies that, in fact, various, even including people who are historically indigenous people, can be made, right? Again, every person that is indigenous, every person that is now colonizer, once there was an indigenous place, there was an indigenous authentic culture that didn't originate in malice, right? But you have to go, it depends on how far back you have to go to find it, right? If you're an Australian if you're Australian, there's somewhere you can go far enough probably back, but you have to go all the way back into Britain. And many Australians, they don't even speak their original British language. They can't even do their accent correctly, right? So they're removed from the place they're in. They're not connected to the land in Australia and the native people of Australia, and they're removed from their place of origin in Britain. And even in Britain, you have to go way, way, way back to find something that you can root yourself in and say, I am part of this, and it's not a sick, destructive, cancerous force. You know what I'm saying? So the question is like, so I mean, for those people, this is another, it's not impossible for people to, for people who have grown up and lived in a broken life ways, it's very difficult to shift out of it. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. But for children, that's a different thing. Right, if the systems can be fought and dismantled, then again, if the systems are finally dismantled, then there's something that you can actually build from. But the thing is, you have to fight. Unfortunately, you have to fight those internal injustices if you are from the colonizer world, or right. That's why I say if you're not dismantling, you're not actively anti-racist. You are, whether you are being racist or not, you are perpetuating it. If you're not actively anti-colonialist, neo-colonialist, as a colonizer, whether you do nothing, you are perpetuating the system just by existing, right? And also, I would argue, if you're not anti-capitalist, as well as the economic domain, you are also empowering that system too, right? Whether you know it or not. Okay, but anyways, I gotta go though. So long story short, keep building indigenous civilizations. Help your indigenous people. Support some native people around you. I'm working hard on Neofeud 2. I'm gonna need testers sometime in November. So we're looking out for that. And I'll be back to stream on the Twitch stream later on in the evening. And don't forget, everything we do here is supported by the sales of the games like. The sales of the games such as Neofeud 1, which is a game that is not on sale right now, but you can wishlist it, and it does support everything that we do here at the Silver Spoon Cooperative. And you can also help us out by it's like Stray, and also Hollow Knight apparently. And you can also help us out by getting the game on itch.io for Windows and for Mac and for Linux. And if you want, there's a game that actually deals with that indigenous ancient civilization that I was talking about, and the game that's out, it's actually a small Silver Spoon game I made while working on Neofeud 2. It's called Indigenous Star, and it is out on itch, and it deals with an empire that arrives on your planet to eradicate and plunder, and you must heal the land and people, prevent erasure of your native language and culture, and confront invaders before it's too late. And this one is actually based upon our Hawaiian history and interactions with colonialism, but in a science fictional setting. So it's called Indigenous Star. And there's also Pigeon with Gun and Woman is a book by Holly, who was raised in right-wing evangelical Christian culture, critiquing that culture from the perspective of Mary in the Bible. You can also follow us at Silver Spoon Games, or you can help us out at patreon.com/Neofeud for this work, as well as give us ongoing support and get access to behind the scenes of what we're working on here at the Silver Spoon Cooperative. And you can also help us out Let me just check it so fast. Yeah, you can always out as a Cyberspook Cooperative and also get access to behind the scenes of what we're working on, as well as Discord access. And sorry, it's being silly right now. And you can also help us out at ko-fi.com/Silverspook. At ko-fi.com/Silverspook, you can give us a one-time donation, and the maximum amount of the revenue does come through when you donate through that. So we really appreciate that as well. But yeah, and then sorry, I'm just gonna check this real fast. You can also follow at Silverspook Games at Mastodon.social and or at Silverspook Games at Wandering.shop on Mastodon. You can follow on Twitter at Silverspook and at Silverspook Guy for the Silverspook Games for the game stuff, and then Silverspook Guy for the personal takes. I would say this is a lot of personal takes and some of the game stuff, but a lot of it tends to go to the Silverspook Games when it comes to game stuff specifically. But you can follow either or both, and we're also on Blue Sky and all over the place. And don't forget, you can also follow Holly at Allergic to Blue. At Allergic to Blue, Holly is of course a partner here, a parent, a caregiver with myself of Indigenous Native Hawaiians here in U.S. occupied Hawaii. And of course, I can also thank all these people. Thanks a lot for all your support. Without your support, it's hard to keep doing this work. So thanks so much to all of our Patreon patrons. We do need to get the Patreon level up. So if anybody, or is able to slightly increase their patronage to any level, it is greatly appreciated because, we're still behind on that. I know like economy is really bad right now. The shutdown is extremely terrible. So extra thank you under these circumstances to all of our Patreon supporters. 100%, we are like we're like at the poverty line. So we're not rich by any stretch of the imagination. And so we really appreciate every single dollar. Really makes a difference, I swear. Thank you so much. And now, sorry. I on Twitch, you always got to rate out. But thanks. Until next time, keep your mirror shades polished, be excellent to each other, and have a good rest of your day. And just let's build a better world and face all of our problems in history. And I have faith that it will be a much better future than the many dystopian cautionary tales I and others have